I felt like I just kind of landed into a place that was comfortable, but also fulfilling in a way. And so that was kind of how I got into it. I felt like it chose me. And then I ended up, when I needed to grow a little bit, or I wanted to move to the next level in healthcare, there wasn't really the position I was in. There wasn't any vertical or lateral movement. It was kind of this singular.
Awekenge, this is Mental Mythos, hosted by Asego Toto.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mental Mythos. I'm your host, Asego Toto. And before we dive into today's incredible conversation, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy what you hear today, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps others discover the valuable insights we share every week. And if you find today's episode particularly inspiring or insightful, don't forget to share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think could benefit from it. Thank you for your support. It truly means the world to us. Now, let's get back into our conversation.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that experience was like for you?
Yeah. So when I got laid off in 2020, I think that the reason it had such a profound impact on me was because it was, one, it was the first time I'd ever been laid off or let go from a job. And while I've had failures in life, they were kind of failures of my own doing that I could try again. But whenever you're let go from a job or laid off, it wasn't anything due to myself. It wasn't anything that I did. It was a weird time. It was a business decision. A lot of people got laid off during that time. So it wasn't unique to me and it wasn't special to me. But being the first time that it had ever happened, it definitely hit me hard because, there was a lot of my identity and self-worth was tied into that role, that job, because I think a lot of people who go into healthcare, I used to always say that when you care for people, it's not necessarily kind of what you do, it's kind of who you are. I think people who choose that profession have some sort of innate desire to help people. And so it can kind of make it hard to distinguish, and it makes it easy to tie your self-worth and some value to it. And so when that comes crumbling down, it feels like naturally that your own self-worth, your own self-value kind of come down with it. And that was the most difficult part of it, I think, for me. If that makes sense.
It actually does. You mentioned that you felt some self-worth. Would you say that you did? Actually, firstly, what made you be encourage you of being in the healthcare industry and field? And also, how did your layoff affect your sense of self-worth, and how did you attach your self-worth with the job that you had?
Well, let me see. Sorry. So getting into healthcare, I think My mother has worked in healthcare since I was 10. I'm 47. So she worked for the same organization, the same hospital that I worked for. It was actually the hospital I was born at. And this was my second time to work at this hospital. So it wasn't, I worked in healthcare in the early 2000s, and then I took a little break. And then I kind of got back into, I didn't know that I really wanted to go into healthcare when I finished my undergrad in like the mid 2000s. And I got into personal training and did some stuff like that. So there was still this underlying theme of helping people with their health in some sort. But then in 2009, I was living in Austin and ended up getting a job in a level 1 trauma center. And I kind of, whenever that happened, I spent 6 years doing that before I went into the last job that I spent 6 years doing. But it was, once I got there, I felt like healthcare kind of chose me in a way that I enjoyed it. It was fulfilling. You got something out of being part of a team. You got something out of helping people. And, I felt like I just kind of landed into a place that was comfortable, but also fulfilling in a way. And so that was kind of how I got into it. I felt like it chose me. And then I ended up, when I needed to grow a little bit, or I wanted to move to the next level in healthcare, there wasn't really the position I was in. There wasn't any vertical or lateral movement. It was kind of this singular position that this is what you did. You didn't really move up. You didn't really move sideways within the job. You did that, or you kind of moved into something totally different. And so I moved into management at that time. And, with management, it was enjoyable. But it was kind of like taking your skills to a whole new level of seeing what you can do, and with teamwork. And during that time, I was going to graduate school and got a graduate degree. And so I had invested a lot of time and effort into that. And so, when I feel like at the end of that 6 years in management, but kind of 12 years total as a career, I'd put in a lot of time and investment, time and effort to kind of get where I was. And so I think, whenever you're part of a really high functioning team, and then you go on to graduate school and you put in that extra effort and you do a lot of early mornings and long weekends and time without your family, I think that there's automatically some of your worth or value is tied to that, because you expended so much effort to accomplish it. So it's like anything, that if you put a lot of time and effort to be successful at something, then you have some value, some self-worth and some self-value tied to that. And so I think that anytime that it goes away or it's fractured a little bit, that your self-value and your self-worth is a little fractured as well, just as a result of that.
And in all honesty, I don't want to say that I have experienced it. I haven't experienced the fact that of being laid off. But what I can say is the fact that I even saw it here in South Africa during the pandemic. Most people were laid off in terms of because of the pandemic. Some business couldn't pay other people, their employees, that they had to let them go. They didn't make any money. So I can just only imagine it, because I can't relate to that. And being having a graduate degree and being jobless, didn't you feel pressure on finding a new job, and how did it impact on your mental health?
Sorry about that. Yeah, so it was, yes, there was some pressure to find a new job with a graduate degree. But the weird thing is some of the pressure actually wasn't there, because, what had happened was, during the pandemic, when they laid people off to cut costs. So when you're cutting cost, if you're looking at laying two people off and you're going to lay off, let's say, somebody with a master's degree who maybe you pay a little bit more, or somebody with a bachelor's degree who can do the same job who you pay a little bit less, they're going to lay off where they can save more money. And so kind of understanding that, I didn't feel as much pressure initially to go out and get it, because this happened 9 months into the pandemic. So, I got to work a good portion of it. And so it was almost like I got laid off, I got a severance package. I'm going to take a little bit of a break. But then when it was time to go back, I felt like it was going to be difficult, because I felt like, well, it took so long for everything to ramp back up and businesses to ramp back up, that I didn't feel necessarily that they were going to be looking for people with more credentials, or that they would potentially have to pay more. I felt like that they were going to continue to kind of keep leadership levels flat, cheaper, and just spread out the work among the remaining people, because a lot of people had lost money during the pandemic, and that's what they were trying to do, was save money. But when I did start applying back to jobs, I would keep a spreadsheet, and I would, document who I applied to. Did I fill out assessments? Did I get callbacks? Did I have an interview? Did I get an offer? Did I accept an offer? Did I decline an offer? Why did I decline the offer? And, I applied for a lot of jobs and just really didn't have too much luck. And I think that was kind of the part that impacted my mental health a little bit. It was kind of a little bit of that, but also, having the familiar pressure, like, having a wife and child, and, when you have discussions with your spouse and it's like, hey, you need to consider going back to work or looking for a job, and you're keeping this spreadsheet of all these jobs and nothing's coming up. You're not getting a lot of callbacks. You're getting some interviews, but, if they laid off all these people, now all of a sudden you're in competition with a larger group of people that have been laid off as well. And so that was kind of where I started to notice, maybe I would say probably the second year I started applying to jobs. And, it wasn't so much the healthcare stuff, because I was kind of hesitant to go back into the healthcare field anyway, because I'd kind of felt betrayed a little bit. But, I felt like whenever I started looking at many different things, and there was just, I wasn't getting any responses, hardly any job offers, very few interviews, very few this and that. And then the ones that I was getting, they just weren't great. They were just lowball offers. That's kind of when I noticed a steep kind of decline in into the mental